Ladies and gentlemen, here's the situation. In hand, we have the brand new CPU from Intel. This is the 14900K, but the problem with it is it's not really drastically different to what we had before. This is a new refresh. It doesn't actually need a new motherboard either. You can put this into an older generation board like we're going to be doing in this video, putting together a full gaming PC. It's going to be exciting. But unfortunately, I'm afraid I do have to break the news to you that this is not really the most exciting launch in the world, because other than the Intel i7 that has 2 extra cores, efficiency cores, not performance, there's not really that much different. I mean, you've got an extra 5 to 10% performance that Intel claim. We will be looking at numbers a little bit later in this video, but still, it's going to trade blows with AMD, and that's almost what we had before. So I don't know, if you're looking to build a brand new gaming PC, this should definitely be on your radar, but it's pretty safe to say that if you've already got like a 12th or 13th gen CPU, unless you're rocking like an i3 or an i5, you want to upgrade to the max, this is probably not going to grab the headlines for the best upgrade you could possibly make. There's only one way to find out, and that is of course to get our build on, right after a short word from this video's sponsor.
ASRock's Arc A580 graphics cards have arrived, bringing proper PC gaming power at wallet-friendly prices. ASRock's Arc Challenger features a dual-fan design for both cool and quiet operation, 8GB of GDDR6 video memory, and support for both ray tracing and Intel XeSS technology. Get your game on today with the link down below.
So yeah, I think it's fair to say I've got a little bit of skepticism here, but I'm quite excited to build this nonetheless, because this is still going to be an insane gaming PC, and even if it's not drastically different to the old generation, this is still going to be one heck of a gaming PC. I mean, we've gone for the 7900 XTX, and as I say, you don't need to pick up a brand new motherboard, so hopefully these will be cheaper than they were at launch. The motherboard that we're using here today is from ASUS ROG. It's the Maximus Hero Z790. You can of course use a Z690 motherboard as well, but all of these will need a BIOS update, unless of course you're going for a brand new refresh board that will come with the latest and greatest installed. But even then, there's probably a newer one you could update to. I mean, this is a pretty hefty motherboard. I don't usually use the really expensive boards, purely because in terms of value, obviously your performance per frame isn't quite there. But this is one of the most beautiful motherboards we actually have in the studio here. Quite excited to use this. You've got loads of features, and you've also got loads of USB. So if you're someone that doesn't want to use loads of devices, this is a pretty cool option. And it's also got this little screen here that's going to light up. Of course, as you'd expect, installation is exactly the same as the previous generation of Intel CPUs. Very, very straightforward and simple. I mean, the chip itself hasn't changed either. You can see it just says 14 on it rather than 13. And then we drop this down into our socket and then seal it up into position. I think the best advice that I can give anyone that's watching this video that is choosing between AMD and Intel is pretty much to consider how many cores you want or need, because I think for a lot of people it is going to make sense to go for Intel, to have those 24 cores and still maintain the fantastic gaming performance. You know, realistically, 8 cores isn't the most future-proof in the world from the 7800X3D, but then again, on the contrary, it's definitely not quite as simple as that, because the counter-argument is that if you're only going to be using 8 cores for gaming now, by the time you need more than that, there'll be some newer AMD CPUs that will have better gaming performance and probably a higher core count that you can then upgrade to, whereas if you go with this, your options are probably going to be quite limited, especially if you're going for the top-end i9. As you're watching this beautiful overhead shot of me installing some RAM, by the way, I should tell you that this is actually some of the fastest kits that we've got here, because this is a 6600 megahertz DDR5 kit. And I realize I haven't actually told you what the kit is. This is Corsair Vengeance Pro, and this is a 32GB kit. But if you're going for a super high-end build, maybe look at getting 64, or you can now actually get 48GB kits that you could double up to, quick maths, 96. Yes, that's right, gigabytes of memory. I'll tell you what though, if gaming PCs start to need 96GB of RAM anytime in the next 8 years, I'll eat my hat. 1 million subs and I'll eat a motherboard. In terms of storage, we're going for the fastest Gen 4 drive we have on hand. This is from Samsung, it's the 990 Pro. This is a little bit more expensive than some other offerings, but as we always say, check out the different sales and buy the fastest, I almost said kit, it's not a memory, buy the fastest drive you can that comes on sale, especially with Black Friday and things. You can typically get like a 2TB drive for basically the same as a 1TB if you know where to look. So keep an eye out and buy some fast storage. We've got a nice large heatsink on this, so let's remove that. Make sure you take the protector off the thermal pad. Guarantee there are loads of people that are watching this video that have built similar to this and have just gone, oh, did I have to do that? Make sure you do the same on the other side, by the way. These days, if you go for a larger capacity drive, that's almost certainly going to be double-sided. That's why you have some thermal pads on both sides. to properly dissipate the heat. Let's line this up with the slot, push it into place, grab the heatsink, and then drop this back on top. I will have a little bit of a moan here, because what is the point of a toolless SSD catch if the whole thing still needs a screwdriver to actually fit down? Why don't they copy MSI? Peely time. Double peely, triple peel. And today is not the only new launch we're covering here today. Oh no, because I know there is going to be plenty of people that are actually going to be just as, if not more excited about this, because people have been waiting for this. Someone called Rob, one of my friends, has been waiting for this for ages. This is actually an LCD cooler from Lian. It uses their ALV2 fans. Hold on a minute, future markers here, I'm being silly. They're not ALV2 fans, they're SL Infinite fans. Back to old markers. But you've now got this screen on it like you have from NZXT or of course Corsair. But people, myself included, absolutely love the fans. So for ages they've wanted to sort of have a complete Lian ecosystem but then still have that LCD. That is possible today. All of the fans actually come pre-applied, which as we've recently discovered can be a blessing or a curse, because why do they need so much plastic? Save the planet. What was I saying before I was ranting? Something about the orientation. Yes, that's right. You want to make sure that they are, of course, actually going in the orientation that you want. So here we have them blowing into the radiator, which is great because it means we don't need to screw it in. We can literally just drop this into our case and it should work. But if you're going to say put this on the front of your case, then obviously you'd need to turn the fans the other way, which would still mean taking all the screws out and screwing it in. So it'd actually be more effort, not less. But of course, if you're wondering why we're actually taking this out the box now, it's because it is far easier on the Intel side of things to actually get your mounting sorted out for your CPU cooler before you put it into the case. Because while a lot of them, it's still pretty easy to get it all installed, sometimes you won't have a CPU cutout big enough, or there'll be something in the way that will mean you'll put your board in, and then when you actually come to fit the cooler, you won't be able to do it. You have to take the whole board out again. So if you do it now, that can't happen to you. Just pick up your motherboard, turn it over, pick up the back plate, and just feed this through. Then you can place it back down. Then you're going to want to fish out these little spaces, and this is what will actually keep this in place. Just put those over the posts. Moan again about how you've got a plastic bag for literally everything. Seriously, Lian, there is no need. It's not acceptable. Like seriously, why on earth do you need a bag for a cable? By itself. So far so good then, everything seems to be going according to plan, but what will happen when we actually get our case involved? This is one that I've literally just got hold of. Overclockers UK sent this out with thanks guys. This is from Phanteks, it's the G360A, and this is one of the more reasonable priced offerings really, because it comes with 3 RGB fans as standard, and it still has support for a 360mm radiator either at the top or at the front, not both at the same time, and it pretty much has all of the features that you'd want, but then it skimps out on some things that maybe doesn't matter quite so much. So the first thing that I actually noticed about this case is that it is a little bit smaller, which I think a lot of people will like, but then also not quite so good. The quality doesn't feel as nice. It's definitely not made out of such strong metal, and I'm not sure whether that matters, because as soon as you actually put everything inside this, it's gonna get obviously a lot stronger as it's got more stuff to give it that rigidity, but it's by no means a cheap case, and I've been using the 300 series from Phanteks for ages and I've always been pretty impressed. So this is pretty much the lowest price case that does everything and does it very well. But let's place this down on top of our desk. I mean, this is actually a very interesting point because we've literally just built in the brand new Phanteks case, the Nv5, that is priced about the same as this, but the quality of that is so superior, it's kind of ridiculous. But then fundamentally, that doesn't come with any fans at all. So even though the case price is similar, you're gonna have to add at least, what, like 50 quid onto that case, whereas this is ready to use out of the box. Once again, forget that the screws are in the hard drive cage, but then we can get our screws and fit this down. Once that's screwed in, you can of course turn it around and start to inspect your work. You can really see that this is obviously going to be a jet black build. I personally like these because it means you can set whatever color you like. It blends in a little bit better with any environment. But these days, when you can create some pretty awesome white builds, if you're willing to put the work in to sort of make sure all your components properly match, I do think those rigs potentially look a little bit better. It's all down to personal preference. Let's start to plug in our cables, beginning with the USB 3. Oh, there's no Type-C on this case. Oh, I mean, that isn't going to matter to everybody, but you are going to be not using that port. Now, I wouldn't say I'm concerned, but the only thing I do want to do now is to do a little test fit, because I am aware there's not that much space at the top. So I am hoping that this will fit in. Oh, kinda. Doesn't look ideal, does it? Oh, no, we've done it. We've done it. It does work. There is literally no room at the top whatsoever anymore if you do it like this, though. This has to be the tightest 360 radiator support I think I've ever seen, but I'm up for the challenge. I mean, let's do it now. Let's waste no time. You might be wondering why I say that and then grab the box for the power supply, which is a pretty high-end one. This is from FSP. It's the Hydro PTM 1000 watts. I would say 850 or above is going to be fine, but I like to have a little bit more headroom when we're doing a ultra high-end build. So let's open our bag of goodies and find our CPU cable. It should be noted, by the way, that this is a power supply that does support the latest PCI Gen 5 power connection type, but because this is an AMD graphics card, we're actually going to be using 3 8-pins, which is kind of annoying. I personally actually prefer the new connector, especially if you've got like one of these brand new power supplies, but I do understand that a lot of people prefer the old way, so make of it what you will. Okay, so let's plug our CPU connection in. We'll use both of the 8-pins, but you're probably not going to need to do this unless you're putting some serious power into this chip. All that's left to do now before we actually install our cooler is to get this dummy CPU cable in. It's the one nearest the socket, look. And then the moment of truth now commences, where we insert this for real. I don't even know what it gets caught on, but it does get caught. Oh, but there we go. Need more hands. Get this screwed in then. But with that, I think we can now move on to actually getting our pump head fitted. We do have thermal paste pre-applied, so it should just be a case of dropping this on top, grabbing our screws before they literally run away, drop them on top, look. It is worth noting that these are actually a little bit thinner than some of the other cooler screws I've used, which does make it slightly more difficult to do this by hand, but as you can see, I have very easily managed this, so it's not a problem. Oh, I thought we'd plug them all in. There's one more fan connection to actually connect. Made my life a bit more difficult here, but there was no other way really. So it definitely is starting to get a little bit more complicated now. We need to work with cable management and things. We have our little, I don't know, like fan cable RGB connector and things that needs to plug into our junction box. There's this little connection down the bottom. Let's grab our power supply though and get this hooked up. Oh, for really? How have I managed that? I've plugged the wrong end of this into the wrong bit. I hate radiators so much. You do not understand. I've got to take the freaking thing out because I've used the wrong end of these cables. So flipping annoying.
I hate radiators.
Right, back on track. What was it? Power supply, extra cables. Obviously you need to have your 8 or 3x8 PCIe for your graphics cards, and then I think some SATA as well, and of course the ATX. So cables in, and then with the whole unit facing down, drop it into our basement. Then we have all of these cables that have now come out the power supply. The first one I'm going to connect is the SATA. That should do our RGB lighting for both the Phanteks case fans. Where's the other one? Here it is for the Lian. Then we can bring everything round again, connect our ATX, give it a good push and a wiggle. But at this stage, I think we are almost done actually, which means we can bring out my favorite thing. Actually, the GPU that I've really liked of this generation, the 7900 XTX, not just actually the XTX itself, but also this particular variant, because this one is from ASUS. It is massive, so it is gonna completely dominate this case, but I think it is a good example of one of the largest graphics cards you can currently buy. So if this fits in there, most other things are gonna fit too. I mean, just look at the size of this. It's the size of my head. It's bigger than my head. This is very metallic. It has loads of mass, and you know it's gonna perform and be very cool to boot. Forgot to take the slot covers out, but now really does come the moment of truth. I mean, I know it's gonna fit, but is it gonna look silly? Oh, I spoke too soon. I spoke too soon. It doesn't actually fit. I didn't expect that. This is in the way. The chassis isn't wide enough to actually fit this. Oh. But I mean, that's just disappointing. I don't think there's any way around this. I did come prepared though. We have our backup option, which is the much smaller AMD reference design. That won't be as cool in terms of looks or in terms of actually being cool, but this is still more than sufficient, and this is almost certainly going to fit in. And it matches our theme a bit better as well. Is that in? Yes! Huzzah! Phanteks case, I really wanted to love you. And you are good for the money, but it hasn't aged well. Well, crisis averted anyway. It does at least mean that, well, you guys know what does and doesn't work, gives you an idea. And this is why I do these builds, so I can make the mistakes so you don't have to. And then, actually surprisingly heavy now, we have our rig completed. And I mean, I would look to get some custom cables, because if you are seriously going to be spending this sort of money, I think getting rid of that would look a whole lot nicer. But it looks pretty good so far, really. This is definitely going to come alive as soon as we turn it on. I should show you the other side, and this is with minimal cable management. I've done a tiny bit, but once again, this sort of shows you what you have to work with. Nothing really too crazy, to be fair, but there are not as many points as I would like. There are tie-down points, but there's not like baked-in tie-down points. You're still going to have to use cable ties and things rather than having straps for these sort of cables and so. But yeah, if you're after a smaller size chassis, then clearly this is going to be a very strong option, or maybe you want to get the maximum value. But I think if you are looking for something this sort of price point, going for a more expensive case would make sense, because I like what we have here, but this is more aimed at cheaper PCs rather than something this high-end. Let's proceed to see if this thing actually works though, shall we? Which also means updating that BIOS, because I don't think this is going to do anything until we actually get that updated. And I should grab my USB flash drive for this. And I will also note that, I know it sounds a bit counterproductive, but you need to use like the oldest USB that you have lying around. Like find the USB 2 drive that's formatted in FAT32, because if you don't have one of those, it doesn't actually work. And pretty much all of the modern ones are large capacity and use exFAT, which doesn't work with USB flashback, which is a bit annoying. So proceed to grab your USB, obviously grab the latest version of the BIOS software on there from the manufacturer's website. You'll probably need to rename it. The ASUS one will rename it for you, but sometimes it's things like update.bin or something like that. Follow the instructions and then plug this into the USB port that's actually labeled as BIOS. Note that not all motherboards do have this functionality, so do check before you actually commit to buying a 14th gen CPU. And then you'll see there's this little button here that says BIOS. Plug your PC into power, and then in theory, you should get some lights like you do. You can see we've got our ROG logo there. This is a very good looking motherboard. As I say, it's expensive, but very good looking. Our screen is also turned on. That looks very high resolution. Good to see that working. I know you're going to be tempted to press the power button. You can if you want, but as I say, I don't think it's actually going to do anything. So instead, notice at the back where we now have this green light on the clear CMOS. If you've got something that's illuminated, something is actually working properly, then it's safe to assume that you've got enough power to actually update the BIOS. So you just hold this button down until it lights up, and then it starts flashing, and when that stops flashing, you should be good to go. Don't unplug the power, don't have a power cut. Be very careful, because updating the BIOS is potentially dangerous, as it can corrupt everything, and then you'd be very sad. Just wait for this light to go out. If you get like a different color light, then that's bad. In my experience, this usually takes about 2 to 3 minutes. Oh, there you go. The light has gone out. Nothing has turned on, but I think we should be ready to press the button. There we go, that is promising. And look at the RGB, look at it. That is so cool. Really big fan of that. And we should just have to wait for the screen to come on, really. BIOS is updating LED firmware. I mean, we've got a display. I forgot to be excited. Don't worry though, because there's just enough time to plug the PC Centric mouse mat that you can buy. Quantities are starting to run out with the link down below. Oh, we have a logo. We have a logo. There it is, the i9-14900K in our gaming PC system. We will be using the ASUS optimized defaults that will probably put a little bit more power into this CPU for more performance. We have XMP1, XMP2, and then XMP tweaks. Let's just go with XMP1 for now though. Resizable bar is on by default. Save and exit, and then if this works, that is the green flag. We're ready to get some games on this and start testing. Right, it's a new day and I've already filmed this stupid bit once, but I've just discovered something that changes everything with this stupid case. I mean, it's not stupid, it's a great case for a mid-range build, but guess what I have? The side panel. I was gonna put this on, but you know what? If you have a radiator that's this thick, it seems as if it doesn't actually go on, because now the catches that you have on this panel are conflicting with these fans. So, I mean, we can just about get it on, but this is not flush at the top, whereas it is at the bottom. And yeah, the whole thing's a bit frustrated. So here's a frustrated peel for you. I mean, it works. It can't argue with that, just about. And we'd also have some very good news, and that is that our single-threaded Cinebench score has actually finished, because obviously it takes a while. And this is going to be the first test of this CPU. And here we have a score of 2,239 points. And if we quickly do a little comparison with the results that they got over at TechSpot, on the 13900K, they got a score of 2,194. So that's not really any different, is it? But let's quickly run the multi-core, because this doesn't take very long at all, and we'll see if this is any different. I'm not expecting this to be drastically different either. And here, 39437. So TechSpot got 38,000. So okay, there is definitely some difference there. I mean, the main difference really is going to be the higher clock speeds, right? And especially over a long period of time, assuming you can actually sustain those, you should see difference in rendering and anything that obviously takes advantage of that. But again, it's still not night and day, but that's a fair difference, but again, it varies from chip to chip anyway. But let's actually keep this running for a second, and we'll get NZXT cam up so we can have a look at our thermals and things. Obviously the GPU is not really being used, but the CPU is now at 100%, and our temperature is at about 86 degrees. So it's not too bad, actually. I think you will need to tune your system accordingly, because you'll notice that some systems will have more noise straight out of the box, depending on how you've got it configured. In terms of power, the chip is actually using 340 watts at the moment, which is a lot. I mean, AMD is not going to use anywhere near that, so make sure you have a decent power supply. And in terms of our thermals and acoustics, well, in terms of our acoustics, as I say, it's not actually too loud at all. I'm pretty impressed with that, but do make sure you tune it so it doesn't sound like that for gaming. And we've also got one more thorough test, which is look at how much power we're drawing from the wall. And bear in mind, this is CPU only. The whole system is drawing about 542 watts. But while, of course, Cinebench is definitely important, it's not the most interesting thing in the world. So let's actually do something that is some gaming. And we're going to start with our newest title. AMD provided a code for this, Immortals of Aveum. And crucially, this is a title that actually supports FSR 3. And if we come into the settings, you'll see we have everything set to Ultra. Nice to see loads of different settings available here. But we do have FSR 3 enabled on quality, but we don't have frame generation enabled just yet, because I want to sort of do it before and after. And we are running this at 4K as well. And so it seems here we are. I have not actually played this game yet, so this is all going to be new for both of us. It's definitely a title that is vegetarian game. It's very attractive. It's a very detailed game. I mean, you can see there is definitely a lot going on here. And we're currently getting about 73 frames a second or so. I mean, I definitely can feel, not latency, but you know, this doesn't feel like 120 frames a second, but still, this would easily be more than playable. Anything over 40 frames a second, of course, is great, but as this is a first-person game, you are going to notice higher frame rates a little bit more. The gameplay as well does seem very smooth. It doesn't look like we're getting any skipping or stutter or anything like that. You can see this from our frame time graph, which is nice. We are losing around about 4, maybe 5 frames a second at this resolution when recording with the Aveum encoder at 60 frames a second, but as you're going to get a high quality image, I think everyone's going to be pretty happy with that. But I want to test the most important thing, which is, of course, how FSR frame generation works. So yes, at the moment 74 frames a second, but let's come here and actually turn frame generation on. We're exit, and immediately our frame rate has gone through the roof now. We're currently looking at 124 frames a second, so just like the Nvidia tech, you get a very big boost. That's not quite double, but that's not that far off. In terms of the image, I mean, we're now getting some tearing on screen, which is kind of a bit of a bummer. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely notice that you've got more frames here, but I would say I can notice a slight penalty to the latency, but I must admit I'm quite impressed actually, because it doesn't feel like we're suddenly steering the character. But the problem I now have is that I think I need to put some form of VSync on, which will now add more latency. Yeah, that has added more latency, so actually I probably wouldn't recommend doing that, but now I can actually appreciate all of those frames. So as long as you're using FreeSync or something to smooth it out, then you should have a much better time. But I just wanted to do this just to see if I can see any artifacting or anything, but there's not actually anything particularly obvious. I mean, there is definitely a little bit of motion trading on that guy's head, but just moving around the environment normally, first impressions are actually pretty good, especially in a single player game like this as well. I don't think it's going to be like a do everything one shop solution. You can't fix everything with artificial intelligence and software features. But yeah, I can definitely see myself using this. Watch this space. Let's move across to our next title though, one that I always enjoy opening up. This is Planet Zoo and our little benchmark zoo. And you can see that we're currently getting a pretty astronomical frame rate here of 120 frames a second. My partner loves Planet Zoo, is pretty much all she plays. The reason I want you guys to see this game is because this is always a good CPU benchmark actually, because as we turn down the resolution, we will get more and more bottlenecked actually by that CPU. So if we have a look at the top left-hand corner, you can see one of our cores is about 60% on the utilization. Let's see what happens if we turn this down to 1440p. And yeah, exactly as I kind of suspected would happen. We're not actually seeing a drastic difference in the frame rate. I mean, it has definitely increased, but with, you know, most games, if you're not bottlenecked by your CPU, you'd expect the frame rate to go up to like 200 frames a second. I mean, 1440p up to 4K is a big difference and a big jump in resolution, but here we're quite clearly limited by something else. I mean, it could just be a game engine limitation, to be fair, but I've tested this before with different CPUs, and you do definitely get better results when you have a more powerful CPU here. So while we're not actually necessarily seeing more utilization, it does appear that we're not seeing a boost to the frame rate actually, which is a shame. I really can't speak today, sorry about that. And then just to hammer this point home, I've now turned it down to 1080p, and you can see that the frame rate is still basically exactly the same. It does appear that as soon as you have all of these people and all of this stuff going on, your frame rate's basically capped at about 134 frames a second. But it's not like anything artificial, because as soon as you come over here, you can see your frame rate does increase by quite a lot. So clearly, this is a bottleneck of some description that is not related to the graphics card. Let's start swinging through the city though and test yet another game that is renowned for being very CPU bottlenecked, some Spider-Man. And of course, this is a title I played and really enjoyed. It's one that really does benefit from being on PC actually, because the frame rates you can get on this are quite literally astronomical. It's really, really cool. I mean, at the moment, without any FSR or anything like that, he says, frantically checking the settings. Yep, I'm not wrong, upscaling is off. We're able to natively render out about 130 frames a second while swinging through the city, which is pretty cool. This is ultra settings, but we don't have any ray tracing. But as you can see, it's a really cool, very visual game here, but we do need to do some additional testing. So let's start by turning ray tracing on. Here it is, ray trace reflections on. We'll leave it at very high because, I mean, this is a £1,000 GPU, so if it can't do ray tracing, then, you know, you guys need to know. And as you can clearly see, the frame rate has now tanked down a lot. I mean, to be fair, if you're playing this with a controller anyway, then I've not got a massive problem at playing at 60 frames a second, especially if you've only got a 60 Hertz TV. I say only, I know most people have a 60 Hertz TV. Let's go ahead and turn on FSR 2.1, set this to quality. Can we get around about 100 frames a second? Yes, we can. I mean, clearly then, this is exactly how I think most people will want to play the game. I mean, yes, it's not quite as responsive as 120, but this is going to be bliss. I mean, this makes me want to play the game more, you know? I haven't actually played the sequel, Miles Morales, so I need to get around to doing that, and yeah, this would be a great system to do it on. But sadly, once again, look, if you turn this down to 1080p, you can see the bottleneck really does start to come through. There is a very big artificial ceiling that is limited here by the CPU, which I say is a bit of a shame because it doesn't really matter too much, bearing in mind, you know, anything over 100 frames a second to me is perfectly fine anyway. But it once again shows that while this is a very capable and very powerful CPU, this is not like a game changer, right, in the CPU space. It's going to be nice to have. I wouldn't stop anyone from buying this because the 13900K was a very good CPU. It's very easy to recommend. You're going to get some awesome results, but don't expect this to be like next generation of CPU with far more power, because as we can see, the games run very well, but they're not drastically different to the previous generation. Do let us know what you think of the build as a whole though. I mean, other than the fact that it is a little bit too small, I really do love the design of this. I think it looks absolutely awesome, and if you were going for something that was a little bit lower in scope, then clearly this would be an awesome chassis. I think the build does look incredible. It's just not really appropriate really for this level of hardware. But hey, we live and learn. As I say, I'd rather I made the mistakes rather than you. If you've enjoyed this video, please smash the like button. It really helps out. Get yourself subscribed. And if you do want to check out current pricing on anything featured in this video, you can find it linked down below with our Amazon affiliate links.
And while you're down there, why not up your game with ASRock? The new Arc A580 Challenger is the budget-friendly graphics card, with awesome performance in the most popular PC titles. Not only that, but you'll also find a gorgeous design and metal backplate with cool and quiet operation. Learn more about the ASRock Arc Challenger with the link down below.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.